Hey there, welcome to another episode of Bill Selak Talks. My name is Bill Selak. This is me talking. I'm super excited about a song that I'm going to play for you in this episode. But first, I'm going to tell you a little bit about that song, how it came to be, what writing a song used to be, and my goodness, how much things continue to change. I had a podcast a while ago, something about how tech makes things better, faster, cheaper, easier. And that very much has to do with right now, this topic, this song, this project. So Brent, good friend Brent, he was the singer of my punk rock band, Rising Decline. Did you listen to that series of podcast episodes? That was good stuff. If not, go back and listen to it. I don't think it's on the podcast feed anymore. I don't think podcast feeds go that far back unless I'm doing something wrong. But you can definitely get it through the website. Just billselak.com. What I did on that is I went through our first album, 15 songs, and it was an episode about the song connected to a piece of educational technology, and then you'd hear the song in the next podcast episode. So it was a way of like releasing it digitally, because this album in 2002 was released on CD, because that's what we had back then. And when we recorded this album in 2002, I'm just glad it's not in like 99, because then my kids would be teasing me. In the 1900s, you mean? Yes, in the 1900s. In the early 2000s, I was working at Orange Whip Recording Studio. Now, if you were into punk rock music, a lot of the music you heard was recorded Orange Whip. Or you can be cool. You ready? Moving on. Call it the Whip. A lot of it. There was, I think it was Motor Studios in San Francisco, and then Orange Whip in Santa Barbara. So I was working there, interned there for a while, for a couple years, and most of how I actually got paid was in studio time, but it had to be when others weren't using the studio, and they really just had the one main studio. And so the way we ended up recording it was mostly 10 p.m. through the night and done at 10 a.m. And then whoever booked it during the day would come in at about 10 a.m. and work until about 10 p.m., and we just trade back and forth recording our song. Now, the Whip had really good microphones, really good all the things. And this was also like when a computer by itself could not run a digital audio workstation. It couldn't record music on its own, besides just like a really lo-fi recording. So you'd have to buy like a Pro Tools rig that was like a 50-pound piece of gear, and that would connect probably via like, I'm imagining like almost like a VGA cable, one of those old like serial connections to the back of a computer. So it was expensive, clunky, complicated, and it was not the kind of thing you would just buy on your own, let alone the soundboard, all of the outboard gear, like mixers and reverb and all the things, all the microphones, the space, 3 different sets of speakers, some of which are about as big as like an 86-inch TV. Massive setup, like legit professional. And so when you work in a studio, I think you pay for 2 things. You pay for the space with all the tech and tools in it, and then you pay for the people, which arguably is the most important part of this. So we did that, right? Fast forward to 2024, talking with Brent around his birthday, maybe. He was like, oh yeah, like got a new song, like check it out. He's like, haha, I was trying to write a song in a different style, ended up being a punk rock song. So he texts me the MP3, and that alone is amazing that we can do that with music. Just let me text you a song. And I was like, oh, this is sweet. Like, what'd you use to record? And he was like, Logic. I was like, any chance you can send me the Logic file? So he does. I open it up in Logic on my computer. And if we just pause for a moment, that sounds like a very simple thing. And the reason I'm going through all of this in some detail is because if you're vaguely my age, when we were around college-ish time, this was not possible, like not even close to possible. You would have like a massive hard drive that weighed about 5 pounds and cost about $500 and can hold, I think, 1 gigabyte, a 1 gigabyte hard drive. And you'd have to have a way to like slide it in the computer as like a $600 thing that would like interface with a computer so that you could have several of them depending on the project you're working on, all like super complicated. And then those files clearly would live on just that hard drive. Now it's on a laptop almost always. He just zipped it, threw it in Google Drive, shared it with me. I open it in Google Drive and it just works. Actually, the first time some files weren't shared, but just a couple back and forths, and I was like, oh, that's where I left the guitar files. They were on my desktop, not in the file folder. Great, done. I open it. I have all the things. I was like, this is amazing. I can see like the vocal takes. I can see all the guitar tracks. I can see the drums that he sequenced. I was like, this is amazing. But it's also like we haven't been in a band in 20 years. So I was like, is it cool? Like if I add some bass to this? Because it was like a synth bass, just a MIDI bass. And he's like, yeah, like he's like, run with it. So I was like, cool. So I do. So I grab a real bass, play some bass, because in Rising Decline I played bass, he played guitar. Play bass, add real bass on it. I'm like, this is amazing. And then I hear this breakdown, and I can, because it's in Logic, I can solo each track. So I'm like, what's this keyboard? And it's like, do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do, but as a piano keyboard. I was like, that's kind of cool, but I heard like a cello. So I open up a plugin I have that emulates Abbey Road 1, Room 1, which is where like all the Star Wars films are made, where John Williams records everything, where the Beatles essentially lived for 8 years. Abbey Road Studios, like iconic soundboards, mixers, physical space. And what they did is and I'm going to go quickly through this because this is not the point of it, but it's just too cool to not share. They recorded each instrument in groups, right? So like the high strings and the low strings would play, and they set up all the mics the way they would. And as they recorded them, they made it into a software instrument. So now I can come in with just like a 24 key keyboard, just like a 2-octave, like 2 sheets of paper in front of you. I can just hit that keyboard, and then you hear like legit strings that sound really good. You can even like play with the microphones. Like, I want more room microphones, and it's not like you're just hitting notes on a keyboard connected to your laptop. You're not really playing those strings. It's not a real recording, but it's so good at sounding like it's in that space. And so I was like, all right, like we don't want the main mix. I want just like the close-up strings, and like played with that. And then he didn't really have like a bridge for that. And so I, like, the way we used to work is he'd bring a song idea and be like, run with it. And I'd take my music theory and my music degree and run with it and be like, let's do this and make this chord that chord, and get all like super nerdy with the music theory of it. So I had like a tiny intro, then he starts playing, and it's basically like his song start to finish, right? Like, I'm not remotely trying to take credit for the song of his. But I added the intro, and then it's me playing bass, and then his guitar is his voice. At some point, I heard the drums, and it looked like he actually sequenced them, like kick here, kick here, kick here, snare drum here, snare drum here. I brought a drummer track in, and there's actually like some punk rock presets that I really, really like. So I could use that, and instead of just picking a random beat, you can actually have that follow a different channel. And so that follows like the drums he sequenced, but it's a different sound. So it's like he did the drums, but then I also like did the drums, which is super cool. And then we get to the bridge, and it really just kind of stopped, and then there was some feedback, and then it jumped back in with the chorus again. And I spent a while trying to figure out kind of what it was. I had something like vaguely in my head, and ended up actually copying and pasting his little do-do-do-do-do-do-do thing with the piano. And when you just drag it to the low strings track, suddenly those are low strings playing that. And made it pitched lower, and then had some high strings, and it was like low strings, then high strings. And it went through a bunch of different versions. You're going to hear the final version pretty soon. And then all along the way, I was like, here's an idea. What do you think? And text it to him, right? Like, I just bounce it. So it goes from like 25 different audio files to one audio file. That's just an MP3 that's stereo, left channel, right channel. Text it to him. Check it out. And again, like, that's amazing. When I was working at the Whip, you would burn a CD, wait a while, right, while it burns a CD, then pop it in the car and then listen to it. And now You just bounce it. It doesn't even have to be in real time. So like a 3-minute song can bounce or like export in under a minute. And then you can just airdrop it to your phone, go listen in your car, throw on AirPods, listen to it there, and then you're like, oh, that's how it sounds in my car. Like that's, for me, that's always the way that, you know, a mix is good. You know, we need to add brightness, like more treble on the drums or less bass on the vocals, because you listen to the car or your AirPods and you're like, oh, that sounds way different than what I'm used to. So being able to get it like out of Logic onto my phone, in my ears, both in the AirPods and in my car is like amazing. And then texting it to him is super easy. Shared it with a Voxer group with a couple ed tech friends. I was like, check this out. My friend that lives in Southern California worked on the song. Then I worked on the song. This is amazing, right? So just the ability to have all of these digital tools being so much faster, so much easier. It's all on our laptops. So, you know, just like a little bit of time, like after I eat lunch, I'm just like, let me open up Logic and noodle with it a little bit. So it's not that it's free, but compared to booking a studio for $80 an hour, it's kind of free. You know, the ability to add like all the plugins, add the strings, add like all the different reverb, like, and again, we're not going to get too deep into it, but like the compressor, the reverb, the EQ, all the things within the laptop, amazing, right? Like so amazing. So let me actually play the song for you now. Take a listen, and then I got some lessons around ed tech that we're going to hit home. All right. So without further ado, what is the song called? I don't know that it has a name. Let's listen to it, and we'll maybe think of some song titles to suggest to Brent.
All my life, I've walked where they've shown me, but as I follow the crowd, I began to see that I can't find a reason for the motive to alienate and press the ones different from me. Oh, am I the only one? Am I the only one? Am I the only one? Am I the only one?
Oh, this is my DJ moment. You're listening to Am I the Only One by Brent and Bill. So, like, so many applications for education. So obviously, like, project-based learning is a good place to start. It's a good reminder that when students are tasked with creative, tech-heavy, but also creative-heavy projects, assignments, they tend to work harder. They tend to work better. It tends to be stickier learning, because when you get all these different creative ways to express your learning, your thinking, your whatever, you tend to remember it better. That's how our brains work. Writing out a worksheet on a formative assessment, not particularly helpful. Writing a song about your learning, helpful. It's a big reminder about our ability to redefine what a classroom space looks like. I'm really tired at this point of desks in rows, learning happening while kids are sitting in chairs in a classroom. With these devices, students are able to learn from anywhere on our campus. And this actually reminds me to when I was on our state superintendent's ed tech task force. the thing that stuck with me for our recommendations as the task force was learning with technology now can be any time, any place, any pace. I'll say that one more time because I think it's so powerful. Learning can be any time, any place, any pace. And what you end up being able to do, like this example, this is not a school project, but I can't not think of like learning and students being able to do rad stuff like this, is that we didn't have to book studio time, right? Brent has young kids. I have youngish kids. So we're not like, cool, like we've blocked out Thursday to Sunday from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. Like that's just not remotely realistic in our lives. Aside from living 8 hours away from each other, we're not going to just travel and pay thousands of dollars to work for 4 straight days. But just bouncing ideas back and forth is amazing. And so, like students, again, can be looking at Hillbrook. Instead of being like in the classroom, they can just be like outside underneath the redwood tree on their iPad, writing music, making a video, recording a podcast. All of these things are possible. We can really redefine what classroom spaces are. This is also a good reminder to me. Did you catch that I texted him like 7 drafts of the song? Is that learning is iterative. This is why I love when we look at edu protocols, math reps or any reps. Really just repetition is so important. That my favorite thing I did when I was teaching, I think it was at Azusa Pacific University, EDUT 515 maybe, video in the classroom. Shout out to those alum. My favorite thing I started doing, I taught that course for like 9 years, I think, and video changed so much in those 9 years. Not as much, not as quickly as it is right now, but my goodness, it was different. My favorite thing from when I started teaching the course to when I ended it was the reps. So every time we had a class over those 8 or 9 weeks, it was make a video. Sometimes we'd make it together, like in the first couple of weeks. Sometimes it was me shooting the video and sharing it. Did I have like a shared hard drive or like an iCloud link before it was called iCloud? And it was like being able to share the file. So they download the video files, edit it themselves, and then they make a whole bunch of other videos. So it's no longer make one big video at the end or like 2 big projects. Every time in class, they're making a video, they're getting the reps in. And when I was doing that for mixing, right? Because mixing, like you can make the drums louder or softer, you can make the guitars louder or softer, but you can also EQ them. So like the vocals, played it for my wife and she's like, the vocals are a little bit muddy. And so, went in and EQ'd his vocals and brought the low mids down a little bit and the high highs up a little bit, all the things, right? Sent it again and listened to it. I was like, okay, I have some notes in my head, and opened up notes on my phone and made notes. And then at some point when I, took a few minutes, like after a lunch, I would make those edits again, bounce it, share it with him. And we ended up going through like 7 drafts. The bridge, when I had the idea of like, oh, we'll have that. And I wanted the bridge to be twice as long. And then actually went into some music theory and made it like super geeky. And then was like, well, like it's cool in music theory, but now it sounds lame. And then here's a different version. And then like a week later, it was like, wait a minute, I figured out what that bridge needs to be. Where it ended up having actually low strings, higher strings repeating the same melody, and then high strings above that were actually 2 different versions. And, that took a bunch of time to get to it. So giving our students built-in time to iterate and not just do a draft, but like submit a thing, cool, do it again. Cool, do it again. Cool, do it again. I feel like that happens so rarely in education because I think there's such a pressure to move on to the next thing. But I think there's really like a magic and a power to you did the thing, now make it better. You did it again, now make it better. And my mind really changed on that. I was listening way back when. This was actually when I first started liking Linkin Park. I was listening to K-Rock driving along the 10 East. I remember this vividly, like maybe to the rock gym when I was rock climbing, driving just right through Pomona on the 10, and I hear Linkin Park come on K-Rock, and they're talking about writing a song, not even recording, just writing it. And the version we heard was their 50th draft. I was just like, whoa. How often do we ask students to do 50 drafts of an assignment? I think never is the correct answer. But wow, there's something to that, right? The idea of learning and projects being iterative, that it's trial, error, and tiny improvements again and again and again. And for me, actually, some of those middle drafts when I was working on the bridge between the two end choruses, where it's mostly the strings, like it didn't get better every time, right? Like sometimes it's just like, oof, that was not it. But just again and again and again, that iteration I think is so important. It's also just, this is a good reminder for me about how creative technology allows you to be. It's really just that simple, right? I mean, obviously other themes, like the power of teamwork, but whatever. I think everybody knows like teamwork is good and important, adaptation is important and all that kind of stuff. But the ability, I think, to iterate is one of those lessons I really need to keep at the forefront of my head, because I think that happens so infrequently. So what's next? I don't know, more songs? For me, what's next for you? Like, is there something creatively that you have someone you might collaborate with that you're looking at? I wonder what that looks like. Anyway, I'm stoked on the song. It's the last thing for me kind of professionally, it's a reminder to me that we can be our whole selves at work. And I was able to like go back and I remember just feeling like so in the zone after like 10 minutes of listening to the song and mixing, like ate lunch, threw on the headphones, did a little mixing, and then got back to my job. And I was like so all in on that, like so super focused, which is actually that podcast episode I think I called Create to Relate. Create to Relate. Yeah, relate sounds ridiculous, but the idea about getting your brain in that just right level, and for me, creative acts do that. So it's being able to take the time in my work day to do a musical task often, that gets my brain in that space where I can just like really focus at work and really like be firing on all 8 cylinders. It's a car analogy right there. And also like it felt so good to be able to record music that I love to listen to, that I'm proud of, to work with a good friend, to work with an old friend. It's exciting. And our ability to do that faster, better, cheaper, easier just continues to happen. It's an exciting time to be an educator. It's an exciting time to be a musician. That's all I've got for you this week. Thank you for listening. My name is Bill Selak. This has been me talking.